Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, July 9th, 2015. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. With this week, 2 interviews from the National Homebrewers Conference where we struck up conversations on the fly. Vinnie Cilurzo from Russian River Brewing talks to us about spontaneous fermentation, a new hop being released to homebrewers first, and brewing Pilsners, of all things. And we talk to homebrewer Holger Michaelis about brewing small batch lagers using a Mr. Beer keg fermenter. If you're new to home brewing, would like to get up into the hobby for the first time, check out our website. Get all up into our website, basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of our audio and video podcasts and our DVDs to walk you through basic and more advanced brewing techniques. You can follow me on Twitter. My username is Basic Brewing, all one word. We have a Basic Brewing Radio and Basic Brewing video page on Facebook at facebook.com/basicbrewing. We're on the Google Plus as well. Thanks again to everybody clicking on the Amazon.com associate link on our basicbrewing.com site. Whenever you think of Amazon shopping, think of us first and click on our associate link on basicbrewing.com. It won't cost you any extra, and you'll be helping us to bring you this show, and we greatly, greatly appreciate your support. We also have associate links for Brew Your Own Magazine and the American Homebrewers Association on our site as well. You can find our Basic Brewing iPhone app on iTunes or Android app on Amazon.com. We have a Windows Phone app. We're on the BlackBerry Podcast Directory, and we're on the Stitcher app as well, along with other places. If you want to put a tip in our tip jar, some coinage in our guitar case, you can go to basicbrewing.com/support, and thanks to everybody who's done so already. And I'm still sending out links to the bonus content that we produced at the end of this past year to those new subscribers, so you won't be left out. Well, let's take a look into the mailbag, shall we? Matthew from Tucson writes, as I've been going through more and more episodes, I started hearing about your fig starter. The smell you describe is exactly what sourdough starters go through when they're being built up. If you still have your starter, maybe you should make a loaf with it. Well, that's an interesting idea. To catch you up, if this is the first you've heard of it, I was it last year or year before, I took a fig from our fig tree, and I made a little starter with it, and I stepped it up, and I took a gravity reading several weeks ago on the stepped-up starter that I made by inoculating it with that fig from my garden. And whatever is alive in there is not very hungry as far as eating those sugars and bringing the gravity down. So maybe the bugs would be more happy in a sourdough bread starter. So that may be a good idea. I appreciate that, Matthew. There is some bad news on the fig tree front. Every year, we cut down the fig tree all the way to the ground because the branches that are above the ground die over the winter anyway. And then every spring it pops back up and it's huge and gives us figs. Well, it isn't coming up this year. A few branches tentatively reached up out of the ground and then they withered and died. And I think it's just the incredibly wet weather that we've been having. I think we got 4 inches of rain just yesterday, and it's just been wet. The ground has been incredibly soggy, and I think the poor thing just drowned. It's very sad. So the fig starter may be the only thing that we have left of that tree, because I doubt, I'm not an arborist, but I doubt that it will come up next year if it doesn't come up this year. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it is a Lazarus fig tree and will come up from the dead next year. But sad news on the fig tree front. Kyle writes in, I just watched the episode on 30-minute boil ales. Interesting. I've been working on a hoppy wheat beer recipe that I only boil for 15 minutes. I've done it a few times now with good results. No off flavors from DMS. I usually use a higher mash temperature, and I was told that helps with DMS and diacetyl. Kyle says the biggest challenge has been getting enough hop bitterness without adding too much hop flavor. Soon I'm going to try it with a full 60-minute boil for comparison's sake. And Kyle's talking about a recent Basic Brewing video episode that Steve and I did where we sampled 2 all-grain beers that I brewed that had only been boiled for 30 minutes. And they turned out good. And I've been tempted to do a 15-minute all-grain ale to see how that would work out. But I can see where some beer styles wouldn't lend themselves to only being boiled for 30 minutes. For example, or shorter time, even 15. For example, a wheat beer that relies on hops more for bitterness than flavor and aroma, or a Belgian-style ale, as in our most recent video podcast, where you wouldn't want a lot of hop flavor or aroma. But for pale ales that you want to be nice and have lots of hop flavor and aroma, shorter boils, even for all grain batches, seem to be an attractive option, and I'm going to play with that some more. Well, speaking of Basic Brewing Video, there's a new one out there since our past audio episode, and Steve Wilkes and I sampled a recipe that I used to brew a lot, but I haven't in a while, my Belgian-style ale. Well, this time I used dark brown sugar instead of Belgian candy syrup or Belgian candy sugar, and it turned out great. And at the end of the episode, Steve challenged me to brew something with a jar of Ozark molasses. He's got a jar, I've got a jar, so we're going to each brew something in secret and compare the results when each of those brews is done. And we may have to recruit some local judges to make the determination of whose brew reigns supreme. Our ongoing sponsors are Desiree and Dave of High Gravity in Tulsa. You've heard me brag about the electric brew-to-bag system that they gave me to brew with, but Desiree and Dave say that you need to check out their the High Gravity's 3-tier electric brewing systems as well. If you have more traditional tastes and don't want to go brew in a bag, you can use the Build Your Own Electric Brewing System feature on highdgravitybrew.com to customize a 3-tier system to fit your needs. High Gravity offers electric systems that can brew 5 gallons all the way up to 2 barrels. You can choose from a variety of controllers that control your heat and pumps. Pick the one that is right for you. And for ingredients and many other products, High Gravity offers $7.99 flat rate shipping. So check out the page where you can build your own electric brewing system at highdgravitybrew.com. And I'm a convert. I sure like not having to worry about my propane tank going out in the middle of a brewing session. I sure like not having to go to the stores often to switch out propane tanks. I still cook with propane outside. I still cook with propane outside. I have my propane grill, but when you run your boil cooker thing for brewing, for hours at a time, you go through the tanks. Okay. Now, one of the great things about going to the National Homebrewers Conference is that there are smart homebrewers and pro brewers that you can just talk to walking around everywhere. And most are very generous in sharing information with you. And Vinnie Cilurzo of Russian River is certainly one of those generous guys. We ran into him in the exhibit hall, and I just wanted to stop him to talk to him for just a couple of minutes, just to get a quick soundbite or two. But turns out that we talked for almost half an hour about spontaneous fermentation, a new hop being released just to homebrewers, and a few tips on brewing some great Pilsners, of all things. You don't associate Vinnie with Pilsners, at least not yet. But I'm sure that he's going to dominate that style like he's done the hoppy beers as well. But first, I want to share a short interview with homebrewer Holger Michaelis, who I had corresponded with before the conference. Now, Holger is using the little plastic Mr. Beer keg fermenters to brew small batch lagers using a cooler and ice for primary fermentation and his fridge for lagering. Introduce yourself and where you're from.
I'm Holger Michaelis. I'm from Oakland, California.
Okay, and you emailed me a while back, and I said, that's an interesting technique that you're using. And I was thinking to myself, I hope I run into this guy at the conference because I want to talk about it. You are doing kind of low-tech, small-scale lagering using Mr. Beer equipment, right?
Yes.
Tell me all about it.
So, inspired by your show, I went out and got some Mr. Beer fermenters, and I have a cooler that just fits them, and I make the wort just like anyone normally would, cool it using an ice bath down to lagering temps, and ferment it in the Mr. Beer fermenter. But to keep it cool, since I don't have an exclusive beer fermenting fridge, I simply get a block of ice that I put at the bottom of the cooler that just fits the Mr. Beer fermenter, and maintain it, monitor it, maintain lagering temps. And then when it's done fermenting, since the Mr. Beer fermenter fits perfectly within a fridge because it's so flat and squat, I do the lagering simply in the normal everyday food fridge. Obviously, displacing real food items, much to the dismay of my wife, but she tolerates my hobby, thankfully, and I love her for it.
Well, if you brew beers that she likes, then,
yes.
that
she
helps.
appreciates the work. She appreciates the work. She's a beer drinker, so. Yeah.
And are these all grain worts, or?
The first experiment I did, because I didn't know how to turn out, I used just simply extract, and that turned out okay. It might have been the yeast strain I used, but then after that I went to all grain, and so far the first two results have been great. My friends have tried it and said, "My God, this is great. How did you do this?" So far the results seem promising, and I'm lagering it on the yeast. I don't transfer it, which was inspired by your show also. I don't know if it was John Palmer or Chris Colby. Somebody said, "Yeah, I stopped transferring them." So I thought, "Oh, wait a minute, this has potential here," because then I'm minimizing oxidation. And I seal the top, I don't know what it's worth, with electrician's tape, the top of the Mr. Beer fermenter, right around the little cap, because there is a hole there. I don't know what that minimizes necessary, but I'm hoping that the CO2 stays on top. And, I only lager it for about 3 weeks. So I don't know if this will work for something where someone expects to lager for really extended periods of time. But so far the results have been promising.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was going to ask you if you were worried about exposure to oxygen and or whatever might be floating around inside the fridge. But the way the Mr. Beer little plastic keg works is it doesn't have an airlock. It just has little notches cut in the threads of the container, so that when you screw it on, it can still allow air to escape. And one would think that it would allow air to come in as well. But after fermentation, sealing that up might be a good idea if you're going to lager for an extended period of time.
Yeah. Well, if you've got positive pressure, you're okay.
Yeah. And so are you able to bottle right out of the spigot, or is there too much
that's what
trub?
I do. I simply bottle straight out of the spigot, and I use just the carbonation tabs when I bottle this using this technique. Works just fine. Usually I have to kind of the first little bit I need to flesh out because there's a little bit of trub at the bottom, but then after that it clears up.
And what styles have you brewed so far?
Well, other than the first experiment, which was just with some DME Pilsner malt, I made a Baltic Porter, I made a Vienna Lager. Those are both all grain. And my latest experiment that's fermenting while I'm here, it's actually lagering right now, so I don't need to monitor it, is a Munich Dunkel.
Ooh.
So I've been sticking with the darker beer styles, figuring they have a little bit more oxidative protection potential. But if those all work out, I'll try my hand at something lighter and more delicate and see if that pans out.
Now, do you do I would imagine that it would be good or easy to do a diacetyl rest, just taking it out of the cooler and letting it warm up.
Pretty much. Or sometimes I'll even just let it cool off in the cooler to maybe more like 65 or something like that, and just put a few ice packs in, just very small ice packs that you'd bring with a lunch, just to bring the temperature down a little bit so it doesn't get super warm, especially in the summer months.
And I on mine. This sounds like an ad for the little Mr. Beer fermenter, but I'm all about promoting anything that works and works cheaply. You can get them for like $10.
Yeah, they're
great.
But
But you can put a little stick-on carboy thermometer on the side of the, under the beer level, and it works just fine. For small batches, if you've got a small space, you don't have the fermentation space to do cold fermentations and lagering. Smaller vessels work great.
I love the lagering inside the fridge. That's brilliant. I really like that a lot.
And so far I haven't detected any off flavors from lagering on the yeast. I haven't noticed any meaty flavors or anything like that as far as I or any of the friends that I've had taste it.
Yeah, I think it was John Palmer that said that. So
yeah.
was just going to say, of course, when you go into like production, professional production, you'll have to get 8,000, because you'll be really busy in a much larger fridge.
That's a tip from Steve. Well, Holger, it was good to meet you, and it was great that we could take time here in this quiet space to talk.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and thanks again for your podcast. It's awesome. I wouldn't have thought of this without you guys.
Awesome. Great. Cheers.
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 Vinnie Cilurzo, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going really well.
Good.
Had a fresh Pliny the Elder last night for supper and enjoyed it quite a bit.
Good deal.
It's a rare treat for us Arkansans.
Yeah, it's down, and a full load, truckload, just came down to our distributor from our brewery the other day. So there's a good amount of Russian River around town right now.
Just to make people jealous, first of all, what are you pouring tonight?
We've got Pliny the Elder in bottles, probably a week old Pliny, so pretty fresh. Then Supplication is a brown ale aged in Pinot Noir barrels with sour cherries and Brettanomyces, Lacto, PDO. Then got a few cases of our Pilsner, STS Pils. It's a hoppy German Pils. It's like a 50 bittering unit Pilsner, but still really holds in the classic German sense of that style. It's very dry, finishes at 1.6, 1.7 Plato, which is how I really like my beers. And then we've got two special bottles, 3 liters of beatification of the new batch that's actually unreleased. So this will be sort of a pre-showing of the beatification. So we'll open those 2 3-liters somewhere in the night.
And that's the spontaneously fermented beer?
Yeah, it's 100% spontaneous fermented beer using our horny tank in our barrel room at our pub.
Love it.
So, is it inoculated simply by air, or is it the bugs that are living in your system or in your environment? Do you have an unfair advantage over us homebrewers who want to do spontaneous?
No. We just did a collaboration with Allagash and Cantillon where we blended our 3 spontaneous beers together and released it first in Belgium last year and then just recently in California and Portland, Maine at Allagash. And we started spontaneously fermenting years ago after a trip to Belgium, and actually Rob Todd from Allagash was on the same trip. And the one thing that Rob and I remember the most from that trip was Jean Van Roy from Cantillon telling us, you can spontaneously ferment anywhere in the world. He goes, it may not be the exact same way that we do it. You may have to think outside the box, come up with your own system. And that's what we've done. Where Allagash has really gone with a very traditional method. Ours is in a horny tank. The tank's not wide and shallow. It's a little deeper and narrower because that's what fit in the room. So, we pump the wort in. Whereas a cool ship, like they use at Cantillon or Allagash, they pump the hot wort into the cool ship and let it cool overnight. We actually run the wort through the heat exchanger to a certain temperature and then let it sit in the horny tank overnight, anywhere from 18 to 36 hours. And then we put it into barrels. And what we found, we used to think we had 3 variables, which were temperature of the wort in the horny tank, the time in the horny tank, and then the barrels and what were in them before, thinking that what was in the barrels before would help start the fermentation. But the truth is we've dropped that 3rd variable because we oftentimes get new barrels from wineries, or new used barrels, new to us, but used from the winery. So that means they don't have any bugs in them. And so really we've narrowed it down to the time in the horny tank and the temperature of the wort in the horny tank. Those are the 2 variables. And the truth is I actually like those batches better with a clean barrel, just personal preference. And so then the beer the wort goes into barrels. It takes about a week for the fermentation to get going. I will say this, the more that we do in a row in a shorter period of time, the more active the second and third subsequent spontaneous fermentations are, because there's so much more going on in the air in the room. But it all starts out spontaneous. We're not inoculating anything, so they're fun, and I think they're things that homebrewers can easily do, especially if you live out in the country and you're in an area where there's agriculture and you can get the wild yeast in the air.
What's your starting gravity and IBU levels, or do you find that there are limitations, or there are levels that you don't want to go above? Or
we make a simple 12 Plato beer. It's 35% unmalted wheat, a couple percent rolled oats maybe, and then some other rest is just barley malt, and we use aged hops just like they do in Belgium. And honestly, we don't ever test in our lab the BUs, but I think it's only like 5 to 10 BUs, and you're using aged hops, so you don't get a lot of alpha acid contribution, but you want the beta acid contribution because early on those beta acids help suppress the bacteria and they allow the yeast to ferment, and then in time the bacteria will take over. If you do have too high of a bittering in the spontaneous beer, then, or any sour beer for that matter, the lactobacillus oftentimes won't work because they're inhibited by the alpha acids in the hops.
Have you done any plating, or have you done any lab analysis on what kinds of bugs that you're getting in your environment?
Yeah, we've actually worked with a pretty kick-ass lab over in Napa Valley that we've tracked it all the way through, and so long story short, we've got 17 microorganisms living in our barrel room where we spontaneously ferment. Honestly, some of them aren't critical, they're just there. But it's several strains of bacteria, lacto and pedio, and multiple strains of Brett and other wild yeasts, and some Saccharomyces, and so it's pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, it's fun. We're in a way, brewers using this kind of stuff, we're starting from scratch again. I mean, we talked to Chris White yesterday about the anniversary that they celebrate every year, the first single strain, beer that was brewed. But now, that brewing this way is kind of like they did in the old days, before they discovered what the engine was that drove this whole process. So you're kind of rediscovering or relearning things that the older brewers knew.
Yeah, so that's a good way to think about it, and it's it's been a progression for us to learn how to spontaneously ferment. We used to not do it this way. We didn't have a horny tank, open top tank. We used our mash lauter tun as the horny tank, and we had a creative process we did there.
So do you sanitize the horny tank between batches?
No, and after all we do is rinse it out. There's a crusty ring around the edge of it, but you never see for full fermentation in the horny tank. The horny tank is only there to be an inoculation vessel.
Right. And you're talking about a new hop today?
Yeah, I'm doing a presentation with my good friend Jason Peralt from Hop Breeding Company and Peralt Farms, and then our homebrew buddy Carl Van Evenhoven, who works for Yakima Chief Hop Union. And this is something that we've been working on for a couple years. It's a brand new hop. The number is HBC 438, so Hop Breeding Company 438. But its sort of underground name is Ron Mexico. And so Ron Mexico is a brand new hop that's not been released commercially yet, and it's actually going to get released today for the first time, and it's going to be released to homebrewers instead of commercial brewers first. It'll be the first time this has ever been done like this. And so there's only 1 acre of Ron Mexico HBC 438 being grown right now up in Yakima on Jason's farm. And we had this idea to, not only release the beer or the hop, but make a beer, 100%, Ron Mexico hop beer. And then that is one of the commemorative beers here at the conference. And then we'll be pouring the beer at the talk today, and then again tonight at the at the welcome reception. So there'll be a fair amount of the beer floating around. It's a beautiful, beautiful hop. It's got this really lush stone fruit, like peach, specifically peach stone fruit quality, I've not seen a hop like this in a long time that has such distinct qualities to it. And I don't know if the homebrewers will. I hope they get how cool it is, the cool factor, that they're going to get a hop before craft brewers get it. And there's a lot of craft brewers that have been to Peralt Farms and have rubbed Ron Mexico, and
that sentence taken out of context would be fun.
and know what a beautiful hop it is, but no one's gotten to brew with it commercially except us. So really, the only commercial batch that's ever been brewed with the 438 is the commemorative beer, and it'll be the only one brewed until maybe a couple years from now they finally release it to commercial brewers. But home brewers get first crack at this hop. Never been done before, and I think the magnitude of that, I don't think it should be lost because it's or should be just skipped over, because it's such a cool deal. I was on the front end of Simcoe when it was an experimental hop, YCR 014, and Palisade was YCR 4, and more recently 369 was Mosaic, became Mosaic. We were one of the first breweries, if not the first, to brew with that. And Equinox we used before it was given a name when it was 366. So to have this opportunity, there's a really cool, it's the cool factor of having access to hops. And homebrewers in the past always got sloppy seconds, Now homebrewers get hops every bit as good as commercial brewers do. One, because hop growers are doing a better job, but two, because homebrewing is a serious business as well, and so the hop industry takes homebrewing serious and makes sure that that homebrewers are getting good, high quality hops. So it's 438. It's an awesome hop, and I'm thrilled and flattered and humbled to be a part of the project.
Well, I'm thrilled that homebrewers get the first.
Yeah, well, that's a show. I feel coming on.
How did you use the hop in the beer?
So we made a low gravity session, a hoppy beer. I mean, it's what people call session IPAs. I think that's the stupidest name for a beer. We call session IPA a pale ale at our brewery. But whatever. It's all good. So yeah, I try not to use the term session IPA, but it's basically 4.5% alcohol. Just hoppy session beer, same hop all the way through. Brewing single hop beers, sometimes it's great to learn about a hop, but it sometimes doesn't make the best beer, because maybe a hop, like I just brewed with another new hop called Idaho No. 7 that's bred through Nate Jackson in Idaho, and then he's working with Blake Crosby, got Crosby Farms in Oregon. And it's this beautiful hop with this really nice, lush, peppery, spice, kind of almost grape must quality to it.
Huh.
And it makes a really nice beer, but in itself it was pretty harsh on the bitterness. So, but it's always good to learn about a hop, doing it single hop, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today. And then down the line, we're now talking about Idaho No. 7. We're using it in a single hop or in a low gravity session beer, where we're not using it for bittering. We're using the hop late in the boil for aroma, which is really what I liked about it. But we learned in using it in a single hop beer that it doesn't make a really good bittering hop, because it is really harsh. Unless, of course, that's what you're looking for. And I really like clean bitterness, so I like bittering with hops like Warrior or Magnum that are really typically low in cohumulone and have just that really crisp, clean bitterness. So, but the Raw Mexico beer turned out really nice because it's a pretty good all-purpose hop. It's high alpha, 15.7,
oh, wow.
But it's got aromas like you can't believe. Like I was saying, the stone fruit, peach aroma and flavor.
So with something like this, which it's a brand new exotic hop, for homebrewers who get this hop, is it a waste to use it as the bittering hop, or should they go for? I mean, because it has such characteristics in the aroma and the flavor and all that. I mean, is it kind of a shame to boil away those characteristics for the bittering addition?
It's the age-old question in brewing is, do you get contribution from the first hop addition? And I think some hops you actually can carry it through. You think about the old German technique of first wort hopping, where you're throwing the hops in. But what you have to start looking at then is the hop oil composition. So a hop that's, say, high in myrcene, myrcene is a very volatile oil, and it flashes off very easily. So to use a hop that's high in myrcene, for example, at the front end of the boil is probably a waste. But, certain European hop cultivars work, obviously, because first wort hopping is, it works with that. So, I don't know. I think that's the beauty of brewing, whether it's home brewing or commercial brewing. That's what...
You get to do whatever the hell you want.
Yeah, especially when you're a home brewer. You get to brew what you want, and that's great, So if, in this day and age with hop pricing going up significantly, I mean, we haven't seen anything yet with what's to come. Our contracts in a couple years, prices jump several dollars, a couple bucks a pound, and that's going to trickle down to homebrewers too. And so at that point, maybe homebrewers do want to think about being a little more economical on how they use hops. But it's also a good reason to grow your own hops too.
if you live in a good place to grow hops. Northwest Arkansas, not so much. But we were talking to Jacob at Modern Times along with Mike Tonsmeyer, and they're using a hop extract for their bittering, and then using other hops in the later editions. Have you guys looked or played with using like CO2 extract?
We were actually one of the first craft breweries. We've been using hop extract since Russian River since 1998. So we were.
Forgive my ignorance.
We were on the front end of it, and a gentleman by the name of Gerard Lemons, who used to work for Yakima Chief.
We interviewed him early in the show.
He's the one that turned me on to hop extract, and early on I wouldn't talk about it publicly, and then he convinced me a few months in. He goes, "Yeah, you know what? You should talk about it. It's cutting edge." And he was right. It was cutting edge for a craft brewer to use it. I mean, we certainly probably weren't the first to use hop extract, but we were definitely an early user of it to take it on. And now we buy loads of hop extract, and we even get certain varieties. So we have Warrior extracted, we have Amarillo extracted. We've played around with Simcoe, but we use it at the front end of the boil for bittering, and then into the middle, say like the 45-minute hop edition. So like Pliny it's a 90-minute edition, that's all extract. And then there's a 45-minute edition that's all extract. Pellets don't start going into Pliny until 30 minutes to go in the boil. So there's really only two pellet editions in Pliny, 30 minutes to go and then Whirlpool. So
can you tell a difference? Have you run into a situation where you've used, say, the Warrior extract and the Amarillo extract in separate batches and compared them side to side?
No, because it's a part of the recipe of where the hops fall, so we don't interchange. They're there for a reason.
But just wondering, if you'd done any testing on, like, say, those two at a 90-minute point, and whether there was actually any difference that you could perceive.
Well, I've again, because we've done single hop beers with almost every hop out there, I know that Amarillo is not a good bittering hop if you want clean bitterness, because it's got a high CoH. So you get a harsh bitterness from Amarillo. So we learned that when we made a single hop Amarillo beer years and years ago, back in the late 90s when Amarillo first came out. And so we've never used it for bittering since, because I didn't like the bittering from it. But I love the flavor, and Amarillo's changed a lot. What people think Amarillo is now isn't what Amarillo was originally. And so when I'm at hop selection and I can find Amarillo that takes me back to what it was originally, which was this really lush peach and apricot, a lot of stone fruit. Now people think Amarillo is this diesel-y, really aggressive, dank, and really what you're getting is multiple types of Amarillo depending on when they're being picked. It's just like Simcoe. Simcoe harvested early gives you grapefruit. Simcoe harvested in the middle of its picking window gives you pine. Simcoe harvested at the end of its picking window gives you more pungent, dank quality. And so we tend to select somewhere in the early to middle part of the picking window for Simcoe to get a little bit of the grapefruit and a little more pine. And when you drink Pliny has a very distinctive pine character, and that's from the Simcoe. So if we started selecting Simcoes from late in the harvest, it would totally change what Pliny is.
And you get the luxury of going up and tasting or sampling batches and all that.
Yeah, it's fun.
We homebrewers who see the bag labeled Simcoe, we don't get that.
But that's very interesting to know. I mean, I had no idea. I had no idea that played out like that.
I've been talking to you for a long time. Don't want to keep you too long, but I've been playing around with the cream ale recipe and looking more into like the Pilsners and that style. Just, not that I don't like pale ales and IPAs anymore, but it's a new interesting direction to take. So give us some tips on brewing a good Pilsner.
Yeah, well, we just I've always said I'm a closet Pilsner fan, so I guess I've come out of the closet now since we're brewing one year round now at our pub, and we're bottling it as often as we can. So I just finally got to the point where I was like, I'm ready to really commit to a Pilsner and focus on it and do it the right way. We'd brewed some Pilsners before. It's been an interesting process because, we're ale brewers. So, it's like starting all over again and learning from scratch and learning the fermentation profile and the yeast profile. And one thing that we've learned in our short time of brewing STS Pils is, since this past June, so now for about a year, is the more you can use the yeast, reuse it, it just has better vitality and viability, and it's making better flavors, and it's healthier and stronger now that we're on to like third and fourth generation. And that was something that my buddy Agostino from Birrificio Italiano, the little craft brewery in Italy that focuses on Pilsners, told me too. He taught me that, the more you can reuse that yeast, the better beers you make. What we do is we always start out by making a steam beer first with the yeast. So we get a fresh pitch from the yeast company, and then we make a steam beer first, so a lager fermented at ale temperatures. So that gives us the ability to grow the yeast at a warmer temperature and get really good growth. And then we will take that yeast and brew a single batch of Pilsner. And we'll take that and brew a double batch of Pilsner and then keep reusing it from there. And then eventually we'll get it and take the double batch from the pub and make a 50 or 100 barrel batch at our production brewery. But, ingredients are everything, Controlling fermentation temperature is the bottom line. Water chemistry is so much more important in a Pilsner than an ale. I mean, obviously it's important in an ale, but let's face it, you can go to almost anywhere in the U.S., take the water out of the faucet, and make an ale with it. You can't say that about a Pilsner. So we've had to really think about how we filter our water. We have had to think about our hot liquor tank is full of ale water. So we have to use our kettle. We have to use our kettle as a hot liquor tank. But then at some point when we're sparging, we're going to be running off to the kettle. So we need a secondary vessel to pump the heated water, the Pilsner water. And so it's definitely become, I guess my point is it's probably a lot easier for a home brewer to brew a Pilsner than a commercial brewer because they don't have all these logistics. Because we just can't drain our hot liquor tank. It's a 60-barrel hot liquor tank. And at our production brewery, it's a 150-barrel hot liquor tank. So you can't just drain it. And, where are you going to store that water if you're...
Yeah, because here in California, you can't waste water.
We're already in a bad enough position. So water chemistry, having enough cell count, having enough yeast to get your fermentation going. One of the batches, we ended up over-pitching in one of the early batches, and honestly, it was probably my least favorite batch because we didn't get it. The fermentation happened too fast, and we didn't get as much of that nice, crisp lager, Pilsner-y flavor. So just as much as you can underpitch, you can overpitch. And I think that's important for homebrewers to know for any beer, and IPAs especially, because yeasts are porous and they will absorb hops and bitterness and BUs and hop oils. So the more yeast you have in there, if you overpitch, and say an IPA, you can end up with having you lose a lot more BUs than you think. On a new pitch of yeast, which we often grow our yeast on, if it's at our pub, a low-gravity beer called Odd Blonde, it's still a 40 BU, 4.5% blonde, or if it's at our production brewery, we grow it on Blind Pig. With Blind Pig, we can see as much as a 7 to 10 BU drop on a fresh pitch. So we'll often add a little more hops for the bittering on that first use, and then it keeps going. And after a little bit of time, you don't get as much of the BU drop, but you see a significant drop. Like Pliny coming out of the heat exchanger is, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, it's well over 100 BUs. But then by the time it is finished in the bottle, and this is all analyzed in the lab, we're at about 80 BUs. So we lose a lot of BUs, and we see a BU drop in dry hopping sometimes as well. So, in that long time where it's sitting on the dry hop. So, but, back to the lager Pilsner thing, I think Pilsners can be every bit as hoppy as, as an IPA. A different type, of course, hop character, but I'm a firm believer that we can be you can make a really distinctive hoppy beer as a Pilsner, and why not? Why shouldn't they be the next IPA? And it's different, and it's a different flavor on your palate, and you don't get palate fatigue as much. And so I love the challenge of making IPAs still. But the challenge of making a Pilsner has really kind of got me excited lately.
Yeah, I picked up a 6-pack of Oscar Blues Pilsner yesterday for the hotel room, because I figured at the end of the day there's going to be tons of hops and tons of flavors that I'm going to be tasting all day, and I'm going to need something to kind of reset, Yeah,
and that Oscar Blues Pilsner is made with the same hop that we use in ours. It's a French hop called Aramis, and it's bred from Strissel Spalt, which is a much easier hop to get. So if a homebrewer is looking to make a Pilsner, I'm a big fan of Strissel Spalt, and I think it makes really nice Pilsner. So
awesome. Well, Steve,
yeah,
we've worn this man out.
We have. I think it's time to let him go.
Good. Well, I think I need to go get some lunch.
Yeah, or some beer.
Yeah.
Thanks, Vinnie.
Yeah, great to chat with you guys.
Cheers.
Yeah, take care.
Thanks again to Vinnie and to Holger. When winter comes, I'm going to brew a Pilsner or two and try to use some of Vinnie's advice. And maybe I can follow Holger's advice and brew some small batch lagers as well to take up a bit less space. And by the way, we ran into Holger at club night at the very end. and boy, that was a long night. And I got to taste one of his small batch lagers there at the end of the night, and it was very nice, very clean fermentation characteristics, which is what you want for those the styles that he's brewing. So it works. Much more to come from the National Homebrewers Conference in San Diego in the coming weeks. In the meantime, if you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to James at basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form at basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. You can check out our support link where you can throw a couple of bucks into the tip jar by subscribing financially to our podcasts. Be sure to check out our DVDs, Extract Brewing and Partial Mashing, Stepping into All Grain, Low-Tech Lagering and Decoction Mashing, and Introduction to Wine Kits. You can find them all on our site. You can check out our Basic Brewing shirts in the store too. And you can get a free Basic Brewing bottle opener with any of our DVD combos. So check that out as well. You can check our site for the listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com. And if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order them online in our online shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link. We appreciate the support there greatly. Our featured products this week that were purchased through the link are Spooky Pookie and Rain Machine, the Forecast Sprinkler, Smart Wi-Fi Irrigation Controller. Very cool. Thanks again, everybody. Remember, I can't tell who bought what, so no worries there. Just click on the Amazon.com logo on our site the next time you feel like Amazon shopping. We greatly appreciate your support. Don't forget, you can also join the American Homebrewers Association and subscribe to Brew Your Own magazine through the associate links on basicbrewing.com. That's all until next time. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dotson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.